Lake Lewis does a great job covering the NFL for USA Today, has his pulse on the Washington Redskins, and also enjoys a little college basketball from time to time. He's kind enough to join us for a couple moments on a Wednesday. How you been, pal?
Hey, what's going on, Q? How are you?
I'm doing well. Everything is going well. Always appreciate a couple moments. All right, let's get right into it. What did you think of the national championship game, UConn and Gonzaga, where I really thought the guard play of the Zags were going to be the difference, and ultimately they could not shoot. It was just an ugly game to watch. I know a lot of people were complaining about the referees. Did you have an issue with that?
I sure did. I thought it was one of the worst officiated games I've ever seen. And on top of that, for it to be in the national championship was a travesty. It was a disgrace for the NCAA, and Mark Emmert gets on the podium and got rightfully booed. Well, I'm Penn Stater, so you know how we feel about that dude. But anyway, it was just a bad outing, and two great programs, two great teams. You just really would like to see the young guys decide the game on the court, and the kid Collins for Gonzaga looked to me like the best player on the court when he was allowed to play. But they whistled him up quick. I mean, they made him a non-factor when he could have been a major factor for Gonzaga. And again, you get a national championship game that doesn't go down as one of the best of all time when it had the potential to.
Well, and the thing is, too, that game, you mentioned the referees, and yeah, they were spotty. There were some bad moments. Listen, that game, you couldn't even get into the ebb and flow. It was spotty. It wasn't a free-flowing game. And there was also turnovers. It wasn't the most aesthetically pleasing game to watch, played on both sides of the ball. But I was a little surprised. Karnowski struggled. They couldn't go inside out, Gonzaga. And I also thought if Berry was healthy and he was going to be able to shoot, and he shot the lights out, I thought North Carolina, I thought Gonzaga was in trouble. And the kid shot the lights out. I mean, he really had a brilliant game, and he came up clutch. He had some big buckets.
He did. I mean, Carolina, to me, I thought was going to win the game before the game started. But you're right. You couldn't get a flow. There was no momentum to the game. And that was because of the quick whistle. I mean, you're talking about teams that have prolific big men. I mean, let's call it what it is. This was a game where you had Meeks and, for Carolina, and you had Karnowski, you had Collins. You had a lot of different guys that were going to be able to bang and play the game. And you go back to last year's game. I mean, come on, you guys are right there in that market. Villanova, a physical Big East team. They let them play last year, and it came down to one of the greatest moments in college basketball history. And it was a really nice, hard-fought, tough basketball game. But I didn't get that impression the other night. It was just a raggedy basketball game where, the coaches were struggling to make adjustments too because of the quick whistles of the refs. And, you see a guy like Jay Williams, former Duke great, come out and say the same thing. It was just a bad game. You can't have the referees get all the airtime in the big games. And I'm a little tired of seeing it at the college level.
Patrick Ewing, Georgetown said they wanted to go in a different direction or break free of the Thompson brand. And it's ironic because what do? They turn around and they hire one of the most prolific, the most notable player under John Thompson's guys years ago in Patrick Ewing. Yeah. What do you make of this? I felt Patrick Ewing deserved a shot, deserved a chance, but NBA college is a grind, and recruiting, I don't know. Do young players know Patrick Ewing? When you really think about it, some guys don't even know the current players. Now you're talking about,
I think young guys here will. I mean, it's just like asking a kid from Philly, do they know who, I don't know, Ed Pinckney is or someone. I'm sure in Philadelphia they do. Believe it or not. And no offense to Ed Pinckney, he's no Patrick Ewing. I mean, Ed Pinckney didn't have a pro career. Patrick Ewing did. So you think about it, I think the kids here do. And I've been indifferent to this. I told people before, I'm a Hoya, and I told people before that I didn't want them to hire Patrick Ewing. I wanted them to make a clean break from the Thompson era out of respect, not out of indifference, but just, hey, I wanted Danny Hurley. I thought he was the ideal guy for the program. However, having said that, Patrick Ewing is no slouch, as a coach. I mean, this is a guy that's coached 14 years in the NBA, and I think we're doing him a disservice by thinking he's just a great player. You and I know that most great players make horrible coaches. We know that.
Right.
However, maybe this might be the difference because let's face it, no one's looking at Patrick Ewing as a coach, even though he's put his time in the NBA and he's getting rave reviews by NBA circles, not out of respect for him as a player, but out of respect for him as a coach. So let's ask this question. If this was any other pro assistant coach being named Georgetown's coach, would there be any kind of uproar? Would there be, okay, this is a good move for Georgetown, to put more of a modern offense in for these guys? But the fact that it's Patrick Ewing and you do know that he is basically another son of John Thompson Jr., it just makes you wonder. But I think we have to give it a chance and see how it works out.
Well, listen, I've said this over the years. When you think of the Big East, when the Big East was in its prime and its heyday, it was because of, A, Patrick Ewing and the Carrier Dome. That made the Big East in the 80s. Now, it'll be nice to see him go back and forth with Mullen and St. John's, who have a better recruiting class coming in. But you're right. Speaking of giving a guy a shot, okay, so Tony Romo retires. We nice segue, right?
Wow.
Listen, I and you know this, right? You and I both know this. For CBS to hire Romo, and then we'll talk about the football for a moment. But
horrible move. Yes. Go ahead.
And you bump Sims, and then you're hiring Romo. Right? It tells me a couple things. They had to meet with Tony Romo. They had to sit down. They had to do some type of dry run, some test shoots, something generic just to test him out a little bit. It also tells me there's not a chance in heck that if a quarterback goes down during the regular season, Romo decides to step away and go back onto the field, because the fact that he's getting slid in to a top spot on a major network that's invested in the NFL like CBS, and you're going to turn around and then leave midseason, he'll never get another TV gig again. His credibility would be crushed, and so would CBS's.
It would, and I think he's made the decision. Not that I've spoken with him, but I would think that he's made this decision to make that situation a moot point, where it's I'm never coming out of this booth because I have a number one analyst job, and frankly, I think that's the only way CBS could have got him. That's the only way they could have acquired Tony Romo, was to have that in writing. That listen. We're bumping someone that's been in this role for 20 years, by the way. A guy that did something that Romo's never done, by the way, and that's win a Super Bowl. And you're bumping him, and you're putting Romo, who's never broadcast a game in his life, into that role. You need assurances, and I'm pretty sure one of those assurances, Q, is that CBS is confident that, God forbid, that if Dak Prescott were to go down and the Cowboys are like, hey, let's bring Romo back, it's not going to happen now. My issue with this whole thing is, listen, I'm never going to knock a man for getting a job. I mean, there's some bums on the couch listening to this show right now that don't want to work. I mean, so I'm not going to knock a man that wants to work, and, good for Tony Romo. But I just think this looks bad at the end of the day. I understand he's a quarterback that had a really good pro career, borderline Hall of Famer. I get that. But there are a lot of people out there, hence two guys right now talking, that have worked their tails off to be in the positions we're in. And I get that these guys are athletes and they give you a different type of analyst, different type of analytical approach to the game. But you're telling me that there aren't other high-profile athletes who've put their work in the business that can't get that job? I just think it looks bad overall. And I don't know if I've missed something over the last 20 years, but I didn't think Phil Simms was bad at all.
Listen,
but I'm hearing people say he was terrible. I don't know about that.
Howard Cosell talked about it in his book. He talked about it when he used to do seminars years ago before he passed. We're talking 15, 20 years ago, when he would talk about the jockocracy, how the jocks and listen, I deal with it all the time, especially when you call fights. A lot of people want to know, if you don't have pro bouts under your belt, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Well, that's not the case with me or you or a lot of guys that do this for a living, but it's just the way the world works, especially in the world of media. What's interesting is, you've been covering the Skins for a long time, so you've seen them take on the Dallas Cowboys twice a year. You're very familiar with the Cowboys and Romo. I said yesterday, for a player being undrafted out of nowhere, having the longevity, albeit he had the injuries, put up some solid numbers, very good career. But ultimately, when you write the story on Romo, when you wear that star on your helmet in your Dallas Cowboys, the expectation's a little different as if you're wearing the Buccaneer on your side of the helmet with Tampa Bay.
Sure.
He was just, when he needed to be clutch, when he needed to step up and rise, He just never did it. Still a very good quarterback. And it's not a knock. I just think that's the reality. And I think he is one of the most underappreciated quarterbacks we've seen over the last 25 years. But overall, when you look at his career, how would you encapsulate his career?
I mean, again, I think he's a borderline. I don't think he's a Hall of Fame quarterback by any means, but I think he's a guy that may be under consideration. But as far as guys that have never won a championship, if we're going to base some things on that, Dan Faust, Dan Marino, Tony Romo is not even worth me mentioning his name with those two guys. And those are Hall of Fame quarterbacks that have never won.
Right.
I agree with you. When you play quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, the expectation is you have to have a Super Bowl. You have to have played in one. I think he has, one playoff win? If that, that's not good enough. I'm sorry. The numbers are compiling themselves, sure, but if you don't have any kind of, pedigree or background as far as those big games, those clutch games, I just don't see it. So, again, I think the reason why Tony Romo's in the position he's in right now is because he played in Dallas. So he got something out of it wearing that star on the side of his helmet.
No doubt. No doubt. Let's be honest.
It's just that he didn't bring hardware there, that's all.
And listen, Troy Aikman won 3 Super Bowls, and he's very good as an analyst. And listen, there's that – we know the Tier A, the Tier B, and the Tier C of quarterbacks. And when you had McNabb and Eli and Romo in the NFC East, it made for good headlines. It made for good football. But you're right. There are just some quarterbacks that can have a great regular season, and they clam up during the postseason. Then you've got some quarterbacks that have iffy regular seasons, but then all of a sudden they step up and they show their moxie and their value and what they're worth in the postseason. It's unfortunate because look, I think it's a good decision when you have those crippling and debilitating injuries that he's had. He's still relatively young. He can broadcast and be on TV for 20-something odd years. So Tony Romo's going to be fine.
Oh, no, the Cowboys are ecstatic about this because, for one, their brand still is put out there with Aikman, with Romo now. If you're in Washington, you're sick to your stomach. If you're in Philadelphia, you're sick to your stomach. If you're in New York, you're sick to your stomach because the two major networks have a former Cowboy quarterback as their lead analyst. So that's kind of sickening. But in fairness to that, the NFC East might be the home for future broadcasters as far as quarterbacks, because you have Joe Theismann, who did it with the Redskins, and you have Ron Jaworski, who did it with the Eagles, and now McNabb is actually on the NFL Network. I mean,
I can tell you one thing: when Eli retires, he's done. Eli Manning is going to move somewhere on an island with his family. You're not going to worry about seeing Eli in front of.
Hey, you had Frank Gifford back in the day.
That's true.
Former Giant.
That's true.
I mean, that's interesting stuff, right?
All right, pal. Listen, always appreciate a couple moments. We'll definitely check back next week, but appreciate the insight as always, bud.
No worries, my friend. Take care. Doing a good job.
Thank you, pal. Appreciate it. You got it. Lake Lewis, good stuff from USA Today. Covers the Redskins. Also covers the NBA, college hoops as well. So really good stuff.